Stewart, you've been writing poetry since you were a teenager, and the Sunday Times has described your children's poetry as essential reading. What is so great about poetry?
The great thing about poetry is it's about self-expression. We all walk through the day and we have all these ideas, and we'll be walking to school, and then we'll arrive in school and we'll have thoughts and we'll have feelings, and we keep them to ourselves. What poetry is about writing about those thoughts and feelings.
And where do you draw your ideas from when you're looking to write a poem?
Oh, all sorts. I remember when I was a child walking to school or back from school, and that was the beginning of my poetic voice. I'd look at a bus going past and thinking, wonder what all those people are thinking. I wonder what all those people are feeling. Basically, I was known as Wonder Boy. I wonder what's in there, and I wonder what's in there. So it is a case of letting your imagination run riot and begin to write. And I can't emphasise enough, poetry is not about rhyming. It's about the initial thought, the initial feeling, getting it down on paper, and then we'll try and shape it into a wee poem.
So you've got the ideas, you start thinking about putting it onto paper or onto the laptop or whatever. How do you actually do that when you've got this blank sheet or blank laptop?
It usually comes with the first line. It was funny, I went into a school in Yorkshire, and it was a newly built school, beautiful from the outside. Parts of it were like an old liner, a big sort of ocean-going ship. The angles, and there were circular windows, and I thought, this is interesting. So when I went into the class, and I said to the children after about 10-15 minutes, tell me something about your impressions of this school. And some of the children were saying, well, it's big and shiny and so on, and that's all absolutely right. Those were the impressions. And then one boy said, this building is like a policeman. I said, what do you mean? He said, it's unexpected. And I thought that was absolutely brilliant. Because the school, in contrast, the school I went to, which was an old sort of Victorian thing, a very old building, very sort of drafty and creaky. But that's how the kids saw it. It was unexpected. It was like a policeman. That's how he put it. That is the beginning of a poem.
Great. Now, in a moment, you're going to perform one of your poems for us, and then you've got a bit of a challenge. But first, do you want to briefly explain the background to how this poem came about?
The poem is called Class Project Rediscovering Our Past, and how it came about was I went to the Museum of London, which is in the City of London, and I was going there to interview the curator, the man who was in charge, for a Radio 4 programme that I was presenting. And whilst I was waiting, I heard some London school children. It was obviously a class day out, it was a class project, and they'd been into an exhibition where they'd seen an exhibition about the lives of 1940s children, about children who lived through the Second World War. And it was extraordinary listening to these 2012 children making observations about 1940s children, and I just eavesdropped. And the poem, in effect, wrote itself.
Yesterday, we went to a museum and looked at old photographs of children. Children were in black and white then. They were in a war, so they had to be sent off to farms and places. They got on special trains and tried not to cry. When the war surrendered, the children went to the seaside, and the boys sometimes wore school caps, and the girls had dresses with bows at the back, and some children had round glasses and smiled a lot, and their teeth were funny. They played in the street until it was nearly dark, and the girls skipped because there were no cars. Then they went indoors and had small food, bread and jam and not much else, and they sat cross-legged in front of a fire and read books. And everyone was poor in these photographs. But they weren't somehow. And they were children like us. But they weren't somehow. In the future, will there be a photograph of our class in the museum?
Now, Stuart, you said you were going to set a challenge. What is it?
Thank you. Yes, I'd forgotten that. Yes, this is your challenge, should you choose to accept it. You are going to be writing as a child in 2012 to a child in the 1940s during the Second World War. And you're going to be telling this child in the 1940s everything about your life. You're going to be telling them about your hopes, your dreams, your worries, your fears, your days, what you do at the weekends with your mates. And if you're going to be writing about things like mobile phones or social networking sites or DVDs or PlayStations, the 1940s child won't know what that means. So you've got to find a new language. For example, if you're going to say PlayStation, I would suggest you go something along the lines of, say, my own private amusement arcade. That's the thing about poetry. You're looking for new ways of saying things which are familiar to us. Okay? And even social networking sites. 1940s child hasn't got a clue. But what you could say is, that's where I speak to my friends, but I don't speak out loud. Interesting, eh? So that is the task. So, 2012 child, write to a 1940s child. Off you go.